Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. The building's all abuzz here. We got our little building here in El Cajon, California, and it's all abuzz because Dr. Peter Kreeft is here with us this hour. And we're going to talk about his brand new book, Symbol or Substance, a dialogue on the Eucharist with C.S. Lewis, Billy Graham, and J.R.R. Tolkien. But we are an apostolate. Catholic Answers is an apostolate devoted to explaining and defending the Catholic faith. And we try to do so in a way that is accessible to as many people as we can possibly reach. And no one has been a more steady hand and vibrant voice and joyful warrior in that regard over the course of the last 10, 20, 30 years in the United States than the man sitting right next to me right now, Dr. Peter Kreeft. We're delighted to have you here, Dr. Kreeft. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Dr. Kreeft, for the 11 of you listening who don't know, is a professor of philosophy at Boston College. He's a very prolific writer. His books have included... I got to remember everything you wanted to know about heaven, but
Never dreamed of asking.
Never dreamed of asking. Okay, I could, and a bunch of others, including the Handbook of Apologetics. Is that right? The Handbook of Apologetics is yours, and now we have this brand new book from Ignatius Press, "Symbol or Substance: A Dialogue on the Eucharist," and earlier in your career, you wrote what I take to have been a very popular book on a strange thing that happened. On the same day, John F. Kennedy, President of the United States, Aldous Huxley, and C.S. Lewis all died on that day.
Same afternoon.
So, really? And so you wrote a book about them meeting and discussing the meaning of life. And this is a similar book, not quite the same. I mean, these are not three men who died on the same day, but this is a meeting that actually could have actually happened in the real world.
It may have happened in the real world because C.S. Lewis and Billy Graham knew and admired each other. And Graham wanted to meet Lewis. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. When he came to England for one of his campaigns, he sent two people ahead to pave the way. They reported back to him that Lewis is... he smokes and he drinks and he swears, but we think he is a Christian. And Graham laughed at that, as you did.
Yeah, that's a great description of. And Lewis was a Christian, and he wrote. I mean, Mere Christianity. I don't know how. That's probably one of the most influential Christian books of the 20th century. It's why many people either stayed Christian or returned to the Christian faith, giving all the assaults on the faith in the 20th century.
It probably made more Christians out of non-Christians than any other book that I know of.
And if you talk about a man, other than maybe John Paul II, as far as a man going out and directly preaching the gospel face to face with people, there was probably no more significant figure than Billy Graham in the 20th century.
Yeah.
He was it.
Yeah. If the Catholic Church starts canonizing Protestants, he'll be number one.
And that's something he actually. I suppose there's a kind of reputation that TV preachers have, and it's not a good one, frankly. But that's not what he was. It's like maybe a car salesman has a reputation, but that doesn't mean all the car salesmen are bad or something. Right. But or all the lawyers.
Even lawyers.
Well, maybe I don't know. We'll see.
No lawyer jokes here.
Okay, no lawyer jokes. Fair enough. But Billy Graham, in your estimation, was the real deal. This is a man who really believed in Christ and wanted to share him.
Passionately honest, simple, and pious, yes.
Beautiful. And so I don't know why you would put a minor figure like Tolkien in with them. He
minor figure.
What did he do?
Well, he only wrote the greatest book of the century, that's all.
That's the other funny. So all of these guys are the big deals in their century because the Lord of the Rings, to consider nothing else, if you take out on fairy stories and The Hobbit and the many other things that have subsequently come out by Tolkien, The Lord of the Rings itself, many people will, as a matter of fact, people have repeatedly voted it the most important book of the 20th century.
4 different polls. Everyone loves them except the critics.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the critics had their own, they had their own problems. They had magazines to sell. So you imagine these three men, C.S. Lewis, Billy Graham, and Tolkien, actually meeting here on this earth, not in the next life as you did in the other book, but here in this life.
I like to be a fly on the wall and listen to conversations between great people. I love Socrates, and I think he lives in the back of my mind somewhere. So I love dialogue. I get bored with monologue.
Yeah.
I have ADD. I think that's one of my pluses. I get bored very easily.
Okay.
So I try to write books that aren't boring.
Okay. So and it is dialogue throughout. Like that, I kind of find it. I don't know. To me, that's easier to read too. There's something captivating about though. It's a conversation. It's like you're sitting and
drama.
listening to a conversation. Yeah, yeah. And I can remember one of my favorite activities as a kid in the summertime was the adults would be up talking, and you just sit and listen. You could take in so much. It's something fun about listening to a conversation of people who you want to hear from.
Especially if they're arguing with each other.
Yeah.
And treating each other as human beings.
This is very polite arguing, I have to say.
It's
however.
polite, but it's non-compromising. They're not pop psychologists who are holding each other's hands and singing Kumbaya.
Right.
They're
right.
arguing.
They're arguing, and they have Billy Graham's driver is there to help the conversation along as well, to give us kind of, I don't know, the everyman view maybe. None of us are quite in maybe you, but not me. We're not.
He's the only one who's a little anti-intellectual and a little anti-Catholic.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Because Graham is not.
No, he's
anti-Catholic.
not. Definitely not.
Wait, you can be a kind of evangelical Catholic.
Well, he's certainly not a Catholic,
No.
but he's not an anti-Catholic either.
Okay.
His view of the Eucharist is basically whatever the Bible says and nothing more. It's sola scriptura. So he doesn't believe in transubstantiation or the Mass or
Right.
even the Eucharist as sacrifice. But he does believe it's a holy symbol. And Lewis and Graham, at the beginning of the book, argue basically about the real presence.
Yes.
And Lewis, as an Anglican, on the one hand, believes in the real presence.
Right.
So he's with the Catholics. On the other hand, he's not a Catholic, and he wants to mediate between transubstantiation, which he doesn't understand, and Graham's view, which is only a symbol, which Lewis did not agree with.
Right. I was very. Of the three of them, I found Billy Graham the most interesting, frankly, because I didn't know that theology of the Eucharist. But when he says, "Do you believe in the real presence?" Billy Graham is able to say, "Yes, I believe in the real presence," because this is a symbol that brings us closer to Christ, essentially.
Yeah, it's no more than the Bible is the real presence. It's the presence in the soul, not the objective presence in the elements that he believes in.
Fair enough. Okay, so let me ask you this, though. And by the way, if you're a caller, you are welcome to call if you'd like to talk with Dr. Peter Kreeft, 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. I'm saying Kreeft correctly, am I?
That's right.
Okay.
It's Dutch. It
It's
means
Dutch.
lobster.
It means lobster,
Yeah.
really? They
And
made a
since
movie about you recently.
Since Peter means rock, I'm a rock lobster. I'm edible.
Can we get that song up? No, we better not. We don't have to pay the royalty. Okay, so it struck me that there are many things that these men could have and might have well have spoken about. You chose the Eucharist as the locus of this conversation. Why?
Well, I know enough about Reformation history to realize that that was the issue between Protestants and Catholics that was the fieriest. For instance, Luther and Zwingli each called each other demon-possessed or devil-inspired because they had contrasting views on the Eucharist. The issue is very divisive. Somebody's very wrong. If Christ is really fully body and blood, soul and divinity present in the Eucharist, as Catholics believe, then Protestants are missing out on the greatest opportunity in human life.
Right.
The complete package. The Eucharist is to the Catholic religion what sexual intercourse is to marriage. It's the consummation.
Yes.
If, on the other hand, they're wrong, they're the most ridiculous and stupid idolaters in the history of the world. They're worshiping wine and bowing down to bread, thinking it's Almighty God.
Right. Okay. So you get this one right, then you've gotten Christianity right. If you get, or a better way to say it, maybe if you get it wrong, you've gotten Christianity wrong, or either you're missing out on the most important heart of the Christian faith, or you're worshiping bread.
And despite that enormous gap between the two sides, these three people recognize that all three of them love Christ, are devoted, honest, pious, passionate Christians, have a lot in common, and respect each other.
And so why don't they just come to the view that, you know what, as long as you follow Christ, these other, what your theological beliefs about the Eucharist don't really matter? Why don't they just come to that accommodation with one another instead of having to actually argue about what is this?
Because that already settles the issue. If the Catholics are wrong, that makes sense. If the Catholics are right, that makes no sense.
I see. Yeah, right. If this is God made manifest to us,
Yeah.
then you can't just say, well, that's kind of let's let that one go.
What makes a difference most is whether it makes a difference.
What could you explain that?
The idea that it makes no difference and the idea that it does make a difference,
Yes.
it makes a difference which of those two ideas is true.
Ah, yes. Fair enough. Again, Dr. Peter Kreeft is our guest. 888-318-7884 is the number. We're talking about the Eucharist. His latest book is Symbol or Substance, a dialogue on the Eucharist. And it's a trialogue, really, even a quadrilogue at some points. But the main interlocutors being C.S. Lewis, Billy Graham, and J.R.R. Tolkien. We'll take a break. We'll screen some calls, and we'll take your calls and continue our conversation with Dr. Peter Kreeft right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
We're glad you're with us. Stick around for more Catholic Answers Live.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their Catholic values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
Every single day, I get to help our listeners of the Sunrise Morning Show wake up, find out what's going on in the church and the world, and then walk with them as we all seek to grow in knowledge and love of Jesus Christ and the Catholic faith. I mean, how could it get any better?
The Sunrise Morning Show with Anna Mitchell and Matt Swain. Tomorrow morning, 6 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Just got a preview. I got a preview of the coming books from Dr. Peter Kreeft. That second one. Wow.
The title is The Greatest Philosopher in the History of the World.
And who is that about?
The Blessed Virgin Mary.
See, I got to read
Seat
that.
of wisdom.
Yeah, okay. There you go. Now, you know what? That might be something you'd like to talk with Dr. Kreeft about as well, is that that's quite a thing to say about this young woman from Nazareth. I guess not young anymore, about 2000 now, but that's quite a thing, and I'm sure that some would take issue with that. You're welcome to if you'd like, but our conversation today is around this book, Symbol or Substance, a dialogue on the Eucharist with C.S. Lewis, Billy Graham, and J.R.R. Tolkien. So as I said to you earlier, I was very interested in what Graham had to say because I realized as I was reading it, I don't know anything about what a man like Billy Graham makes of what he calls the Lord's Supper, but he's gracious. He says you could call it communion or Eucharist. He's not fussing over words, but that's the term he uses. But then there's this other non-Catholic in the conversation, and Lewis. His position is actually hard for me to quite grasp. He believes in the real presence, doesn't believe in transubstantiation. Can you just give us an idea of how does Lewis come at the Eucharist?
I'm glad Lewis wasn't a philosopher. He was brilliant, but I think he was too influenced by a lot of modern philosophers, like Locke and Hume. He doesn't understand the meaning of the word substance. He confesses that.
Oh.
That's why he doesn't understand transubstantiation. He's not an Aristotelian.
Okay.
Tolkien does. So Tolkien is the full package, and Lewis is like 9/10 the package.
At one point in the book, Tolkien says that his answer to this whole thing is the other two should just come home. but they don't take his invitation.
No.
Because they don't see themselves as being anywhere but home.
Well, historically, they left us. We didn't leave them.
Right. So Tolkien's view then, Tolkien invites them to come home to both of them would probably see, I don't want to use the word, well, I guess I will use the word, the most extreme view. That the Catholic view is more extreme than either of these other two views.
Yeah. Just like the Orthodox Christian view of Christ, who is divine as well as human, is much more extreme than the modernist view, which says he's just the greatest man who ever lived, but a mere man.
And where do you get the arguments that you give Tolkien in the book? Do they come from arguments that he actually made in writing, or are you filling those out because you know that Tolkien is without question deeply and profoundly Catholic?
Mm-hmm. Both. I quote some of his letters.
Okay.
There's an excellent book about Tolkien as a Thomist by a Thomist philosopher, and his influences, including the priest who was basically his substitute father, were very Thomistic. So he's the complete package deal.
Yeah. We got a bunch of people on the phone. Shall we go to them, or would you like me to snub all the people?
No snubs.
No snubs. All right, let's go to. We'll start with you, Ian, in St. Louis, Missouri, listening on 96.7 FM. Are you there with us, Ian?
Yeah. I'm here.
And you have a question for Dr. Kraft?
Yeah, so I'm a lifelong Protestant. Both my parents are actually Baptist ministers. And I called right when the interview started, just because I'm currently kind of on an intellectual, spiritual journey that seems to be moving me closer and closer to the Catholic Church.
Okay.
And so I've learned to pay attention when conversations like this are happening around me. How do you think your book might inform that journey for anyone who's Protestant, kind of looking in very much from the outside of the Catholic Church on the Eucharist?
You use the right word, inform. In the book, nobody converts, but everybody understands everybody else's position. So to understand both positions, the Protestant and the Catholic, is the first purpose of the book. And I try to present each one fairly and objectively and as strongly as I can.
Okay, Ian?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Ian, I'll tell you what, your story is very striking to me, and I would love to put a copy of this book in your hands. And I have to say, I can't do that for everybody who calls that. I don't have that many copies. But if you stay on the line, if they get your address, I'd like to send you a copy of this book, and maybe you can call us back and let us know how it affected your thinking.
Oh, thank you so much. I would really appreciate that. I'm reading The Fellowship of the Ring and C.S. Lewis's works, and also, I'm just, it's all part of my journey, and there were so many parallels. I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, man. I am in sympathy with you. I realized, Ian, thank you so much for the call. I realized, Dr. Kraft, I'm in my 50s now. Maybe 10 years ago, I realized if I had to say what book had solidified the Catholic faith in me more than any, without having any clue that it was doing so, when I was 12 years old, read The Lord of the Rings, and somehow that confirmed me in my in my Catholic faith. There's something about it that's very powerfully Catholic.
You know what did that to me in high school?
What's that?
The plays of Shakespeare.
Oh, really? Is Shakespeare Catholic?
Very obviously.
Yeah, I feel the same way, but I know that people contend over that point. But the plays of Shakespeare gave you a Catholic sense of the world.
Yep. And so did Chesterton's Orthodoxy. I was amazed to learn that he wrote it before he became a Catholic.
Oh, right. I had forgotten that. It's something about, we all have different ways that the truth gets into us, but something about fiction is really, really powerful.
You can't argue with a story as you could argue with an argument.
That's a great, right. And you don't want to argue with Lord of the Rings. You just want to dig.
No, it's like music.
Yeah, it's magnificent, right. You've even said that some of your students, when you make arguments for the existence of God, you say Bach, or in a particular...
Their favorite argument is the shortest one. There is the music of Bach, therefore there is a God.
And they buy it.
Yep.
See, and it's convincing. It is actually a convincing thing. I mean,
In a world without God, how could that sort of thing exist?
how could that? Right. That's not just chemicals slapping into each
Yeah,
other. That's
yeah.
Ian, thanks very, very much for the call. Dr. Peter Kraft is our guest. The brand new book is Symbol and Substance, a dialogue on the Eucharist. And Stephen in Saline, Michigan, listening on AM 990. You are next. Stephen, are you there with us?
I am here and present. You guys can hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Your question for Dr. Kraft.
All right. Yeah, thanks for taking my call, guys. My question is, I guess it's just kind of a literalistic dilemma I'm having in the conversation with my Protestant friends and family here. And it's with regards to the passage in Scripture where Jesus says, unless you eat my flesh and drink of my blood, you will have no life within you. But the dilemma I'm seeing is, it almost seems like there are many people who are not in that situation where they have access to the Eucharist, but almost they are, almost as filled with grace, or
Yeah.
if that's what Christ means by you have life within you.
So how does that happen?
So that's just,
Is that what your question? How does that happen? How do you get people who really are seemingly filled with the life of Christ, who are Protestant and not eating his flesh and drinking his blood? Is that it?
yes.
Well, you need this
Good
book,
question.
first of all.
Good question. The church gave an answer to that question quite early. The question was about baptism rather than the Eucharist. What happens to believers who don't get baptized? Let's say you're martyred before you can get baptized, or let's say you're going to church to get baptized and you get run over by an 18-wheeler. Can't you go to heaven? Of course you can. So ordinary water baptism is the front door, so to speak, but there's back doors: the baptism of blood, martyrdom, and the baptism of desire, the desire for baptism. So I think the same could be said about the Eucharist. When he says, you've got to eat my flesh and drink my blood, the main way he does that is through the Eucharist, but there are other ways. A pious Protestant who believes in Christ certainly would adopt the Catholic view if he believed that it was from Christ, as Catholics do. So that counts, so to speak.
I see. Right. If a Protestant were to be convinced, yeah, that's what Jesus meant by that, a good, faithful Protestant would follow what Jesus said.
Of course.
Yeah, that makes sense. Does that make sense to you, Steve?
I see. It does. I guess baptism by fire would be a similar analogy to bring about this.
Well, if that means the same thing as baptism of blood, namely martyrdom, dying before you can externalize your faith, if the faith is there, yeah, you go to heaven.
Stephen, thank you very, very much for the call. I will recommend the book to you because he does get into that. You say something in the book, and you give it a little test that you can do if you're a Christian who isn't so sure about the Eucharist. Do you
On
know
either
what
side, either a Catholic who's thinking of losing his faith or a Protestant who's thinking of becoming a Catholic.
Yeah, can you tell us about the test? It's very interesting.
I've proposed this to people on occasion, and they don't object to it. The test is simply to go into a Catholic church at some time when you're not embarrassed by a lot of people there looking at you, and plunk yourself down in front of the tabernacle and pray to the God you believe in. God, is this really you? Are you really here? I don't know if you are or not. And if you are, draw me. And if you're not, don't. And he will honor that in his own time and way.
Yes, right. And that's it's kind of it's a non-threatening test in a way, because you could say, well, I'll do the test and I'll see.
It's like the prayer of the skeptic. If you're an agnostic, you're a skeptic, you don't believe that God exists, but you're not sure, pray to whom it may concern.
Yeah.
God, are you there? If you are, I want to know the truth simply because I'm honest.
Right. Now, I noticed that you say he will answer in his own time and way.
Yeah, he's a lover, not a train. He hasn't got a timetable.
Yeah, and it's not like the people who follow Jesus say, give us a sign. He's not going to give you a sign.
Right.
He's going to do it in his way.
And his way, surprisingly, is wiser than ours.
Yeah, I don't feel surprised by that.
You know, my favorite sermon is the one that he preached to St. Catherine, a late medieval mystic. It consisted of 4 words.
No?
I'm God, you're not.
Yeah, that's I find that to be divisive and offensive.
Oh, yes.
In the current state of modern society, for you to say I'm not God. This just seems very presumptuous of you, Dr. Kraft. I don't even know if I can go on
I
with
think
this
we
show.
should label it hate speech.
It feels like hate speech to me. So you're saying that this man from Nazareth 2,000 years ago is in fact God, and he's
As
the
he
one.
claimed to be.
Yeah.
Well, the same divisive argument about him applies to the Eucharist. If he's not God, he's the most idiotic blasphemer in history.
Yeah.
And if the Eucharist isn't what the Catholic Church says it is, it's not just another denomination. It's the most idolatrous one in the world.
Right. If what Catholics believe goes on in the Catholic Church isn't actually going on, it's an evil religion.
Yep.
It's to claim that God comes and we eat his flesh and drink his blood. If that's not really happening, we are, of all men, most evil.
Miserable.
Yeah, fair enough. Dr. Peter Kraft is our guest. Symbol or Substance is the brand new book from Ignatius Press. A dialogue on the Eucharist with C.S. Lewis, Billy Graham, and J.R.R. Tolkien. You're going to just get the book. You know you're going to get the book. And pick up the phone and call if you want to talk to Dr. Kraft. 888-318-7884. Have you subscribed to the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter? This is Catholic Answers Live host Cy Kellett, and I want to tell you about our new weekly newsletter full of behind-the-scenes information and facts you need to know about the show. It's easy to sign up. Just visit CatholicAnswersLive.com and look for the newsletter sign-up box on the front of the page. It's a great way to keep up to date with what's happening with the show and see what's coming in the days ahead, delivered weekly into your inbox. Sign up today for the Catholic Answers Radio Club newsletter and see what you've been missing. Go to CatholicAnswersLive.com.
Do you enjoy tedious lectures full of facts you'll never use? We didn't think so. That's why we're launching the Council of Trent, Trent Horn's engaging new podcast. Every week, you'll get lively lessons in Catholic teaching, as well as a new conversation roadmap that will help you share your Catholic faith with anyone, anytime, anywhere. Visit TrentHornPodcast.com now to find out how you can subscribe to this exciting new podcast.
In his new audio presentation, The Very First Fathers, apologist Jimmy Akin takes you on a tour of the earliest Christian writings outside the New Testament. From the most famous figures and most notable works to those lesser known but no less important, this pivotal time in the development of the early church is revealed in fascinating detail. Jimmy shows how, even in the first century after the resurrection, it was necessary to defend and explain truths that are still under attack today, such as the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and the perpetual virginity of Mary. The Very First Fathers is a compelling look at the dawn of the Christian age and edifying listening for anyone who wants to understand and defend the full truth of Catholicism. Order your copy of The Very First Fathers today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, Bouncing Back.
Going through a rough patch in your life or relationships? We'll help you figure out how to bounce back.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host. And next hour, Mark Brumley will be here. We're going to do open forum with Mark Brumley. This hour, a great gift has come to us. Dr. Peter Kraft is here in San Diego to give a talk later this evening, and he was kind enough to come over to the building here, Catholic Answers, and come right here into the studio and do a show with us. And lots of young Catholics coming by and staring at us through the window, which is very nice because one of their heroes is here, and I think it's not making me feel bad about every other day that I'm in here and nobody comes by. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that Dr. Peter Kraft is a hero to a lot of young Catholics around here. The book is Symbol or Substance: A Dialogue on the Eucharist with C.S. Lewis, Billy Graham, and J.R.R. Tolkien. And lots of people on the line, so I'm going to just continue to keep going to phones. Bella in Elizabeth, New Jersey, listening to EWTN on Sirius Satellite Radio Channel 130. Are you there with us, Bella?
Yes, I am.
And your question for Dr. Kraft, please.
Well, it's actually a question that my 13-year-old has put to me.
Okay.
We are Catholics and we believe in the real presence of, of Jesus
Yes.
in the bread and wine. So we believe he's the body and blood.
First of
What-
all, you sound like
you
a
know,
great
and
mom,
her-
right? I just want to say right off the bat, like if every Catholic parent would just teach that to the child, then a lot of trouble would be avoided. And so God bless you for that, Bella.
Thank you.
So what's her question about the Eucharist then?
A question is that, doesn't that make us cannibals in a way? And I'm like, okay, no, but how do I explain that to her?
Okay, how do you explain that?
That was exactly the argument that the enemies of early Christianity gave against the early Christians about the Eucharist. No, it's the opposite of cannibalism. Cannibalism's result is death. This is more life. Cannibalism reduces the number of living things by killing somebody by eating them. Christ multiplies his life in various souls, like multiplying the loaves and fishes.
Does that help you, Bella?
Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Well, all right.
I like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your daughter may. I don't know what her reading level is or what she enjoys reading, but she may like this book. It's because it's a conversation, and you can dip in, and she could dip in on a chapter now and then. Symbol or substance, a dialogue on the Eucharist.
13-year-olds ask great questions.
They do. We do kids shows here sometimes. Bella, your daughter can call too when we do the kids show.
Oh, when is that?
Oh, it is June 14th. But she could call anytime, actually. But we do a special kids show about once a month, and that's the 14th. And I realized right in the middle of that I was inviting you to have her call, and I didn't know the date when it was on. But fortunately, there's a lot of people in the studio, and they helped me. Bella, thanks very much for the call. We go now to Jack in Arizona, also listening to EWTN on Sirius Satellite Radio, Channel 130. Jack, you have a question for Dr. Kraft?
Yeah, I do. It's an honor to talk with you, Dr. Kraft. You have a way of putting things very succinctly. So my question is, does your book discuss, do they bring up the topic of Eucharistic miracles, such as the Miracle Lanciano in Italy?
Well, my succinct answer is yes, just one, the Eucharist itself, which is the greatest of miracles.
Okay. I mean, the specific miracle, though, the one in Lanciano?
No, I don't get into the details because those are sort of spin-offs. If the Eucharist isn't a miracle to begin with, it doesn't produce those other miracles.
Are you of the view that those Eucharistic miracles are there to help people into the faith or help us to keep our faith?
Both.
Both of those.
Both, because there's a doubter in everybody, believer and an unbeliever.
Right. And nothing like a 1,300-year-old living Eucharist. I think that's what Lanciano is, something like that.
If I was an atheist, I would investigate all those miracles and demand to disprove them all.
Right. So just not in this book, Jack, but I think you'll find a lot of other stuff you like in there.
Yes, thank you.
All right. God bless you, brother. Let us go then to Steve in Toronto, Canada. Steve, are you there with us?
Yes.
All right. Your question for Dr. Kraft.
Yes, thank you for your show. My question is, what kind of questions can we ask someone, or what kind of stories can we tell to someone that they don't, let's say if we're talking with someone that does not believe that there's an absolute truth. So what are some tips that we can ask them to make them see that there is an absolute truth?
Okay.
Well, if anybody says there's no absolute truth, ask them, is that absolutely true? Is it true that there's no truth? Is it an absolute that there are no absolutes? If there's no absolute truth, you've got to be an atheist, because that means either that there's no absolute being or that there's no absolutely certain truth, because there's no divine mind that can't make a mistake.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I'm going to make a suggestion to you, too, because I cannot remember which one it was, but I've listened to a lot of your talks. And there's a section on Dr. Kraft's website with featured audio in there. And I think it might be the Culture War one, or I don't, but there are, or the Good, the True, and the Beautiful. You should listen to some of those talks that are there, because they're kind of extended meditations on some of these very, very serious questions. All right, Steve?
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Peter in Grand Rapids, Michigan, listening on Holy Family Radio. Peter, you have a question for Dr. Kreeft?
I do. Thank you for taking my call. Dr. Kreeft, I am a new Catholic by about 3 years, due in part to you and your books.
Welcome home.
Thank you. So I've been, when I try to explain to non-Catholics about the Eucharist, the analogy I use is marriage, and I was curious your thoughts. The way I tell people is I say, St. Thomas talks about it as substance and accidents, and I talk about marriage, how my wife and I are, for all the world, two accidents. We are two people, and we look like two people, and we behave like two people, and yet our substance is one flesh. And it's a mystery, and it's something that's hard to get at. And I've found that analogy sometimes gains traction, but to be honest, I haven't been able to run it by anybody who's a lot smarter than me, so I thought I'd run it by you if that is a good analogy for the Eucharist, if the substance and accidents of two becoming one flesh in marriage work a little bit when it comes to Eucharist.
Well, if you got that idea all by yourself, you're a lot smarter than me, because I got it from the saints and mystics who love it. What Jesus does to us, body and soul, in the Eucharist is what happens in marriage, body and soul, but in a different way. There's got to be a bodily element to it, because Christ has a body. And in the Ascension, he didn't lose it. It wasn't the undoing of the Incarnation. And the way he saved the world was different than the way Socrates or Buddha or Confucius tried to save the world by saying, this is my mind. He did it by giving us his body and said it, this is my body. So that's what we say in marriage, too. So that's a profound and moving analogy.
So I could use that and not run afoul of any deeper theology.
Well, you'll run afoul of the politically correct people. Yes, you want to.
Yeah, that's okay. That's a victory to run afoul of the politically correct people. Peter, thanks very, very much for that call. And that's pretty impressive. Just came up with that. Just came up with the marriage analogy for the Eucharist. Yeah, I think you know what? We got to take a quick break. I was just going to keep going to calls, but Hayden in Louisiana, hang on a minute. We're going to get to you. Right now, you can get Catholic Answers magazine, a full subscription, 1 year, $10 off, 2 years, $20 off. And if you want to do the digital-only subscription, that's $5 off. This is one of the finest Catholic magazines in the world, and we want you to have it, so it's on sale right now. You just go to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com and get your subscription, $10 off for 1 year, $20 for 2.
This is Dr. Scott Hahn, and stay tuned for more Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
You remember the time I said on the air, go to confession. And when you're done, go out and have a big ice cream soda. Celebrate. And a man wrote to me, he says, you know, I hadn't gone to confession in 30 years. Do you mind if I went and had a pizza? I said, oh, have 20 pizzas.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm having a really good day. Any day you get to sit and talk with Dr. Peter Kreeft for an hour is a pretty good day. Something would have to go really wrong for that not to be a good day. Man, all these I see all these endorsements on your book. Among them, Joseph Pierce. Joseph Pierce has written a good deal about C.S. Lewis, and you've written a good deal about C.S. Lewis. What is it with that? What is the alchemy there with Lewis? Great storyteller. Is that why everybody is attracted to him?
He sticks in your mind.
He does.
He's very clear.
Yeah.
He's full of joy. He doesn't waste words.
Yeah.
He's a great mind.
It is a great. Yeah, that's true. He is a great mind. Would you call him a philosopher or a theologian, or what would you call him?
A little of everything. A good philosopher and a good theologian and a good writer always imply the other two things too.
Yeah, yeah. The Chronicles of Narnia is another one that a lot of people, I think, their Christian faith is either preserved or kindled as a child by that book.
I regard that book as almost a miracle, because no other author in history has ever presented Jesus Christ as a fictional character without sounding hokey and ridiculous.
Right. And Aslan is not a symbol for Jesus.
He is Jesus himself.
Yeah.
Lewis got a lot of letters from children saying, I feel guilty because I love Aslan more than I love Jesus.
Yeah.
Because when you read the Chronicles of Narnia, you spontaneously feel towards Aslan the way people who actually met Jesus felt towards Jesus.
Right. That is very well said, and that was also my experience as a child. Was the experience of Aslan was like, oh, I get why people love Jesus. You know, even as a kid. And I think he talked about his writing for children as a kind of inoculation. If I remember right, he used that he knew that they were going to be buffeted. Yeah. And here's a little inoculation for the craziness you're going to get in the world.
He's a spy. He's sneaking Christianity into a place that used to be Christendom.
I still don't approve of what happened to Susan, though. I think he was mean to Susan. I mean, come on. She just wanted to go to a dance and she wanted to hang out with people.
No, there's more to the backstory than that.
Oh, there is?
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
She probably had a Ouija board.
Queen Susan? I hardly can believe that. I hope that's not true. All right, back to the phones. Hayden in Louisiana listening on AM 690. You are next up. Your question, please, for Dr. Peter Kraft.
Hi, Dr. Craig. So as a Protestant who just happens to be listening, I'm interested in philosophy, and I've read a little bit of Hume, Locke, and Kant. And you mentioned earlier that someone interested in that might be confused as the difference between transubstantiation and the real presence. And I am actually confused. Could you elaborate on the difference?
Well, let's start with transubstantiation. That assumes a concept which you don't find in most modern philosophers, namely the common sense concept of a thing has an essential nature, which Aristotle called substance. So transubstantiation is just something somehow or other having its essential nature changed. And what Catholics believe happens in the Eucharist is that what was once bread and wine ceases to be bread and wine and becomes instead the body and blood of Christ, although the appearances of bread and wine are still there. So Christ is really hiding behind the costume of bread and wine, which isn't really what's going on. It only appears to be what's going on. Now, that's a version of the real presence. Lewis believes in the real presence, but not transubstantiation, because he confesses he doesn't understand the concept of substance.
Hayden, where does that move you in the right direction?
I think that I've reached the same confusion that Lewis has.
Well,
suppose you change into a donkey. You could write a science fiction story about that, right? That would be transubstantiation.
That would be Pinocchio.
Yeah, Pinocchio is... John Paul I wrote a profound little essay about Pinocchio.
Did he really?
Yep. As a kind of a Christian allegory.
Oh, okay.
It's a transubstantiation. A wooden puppet turns into a boy.
Yeah. Okay. So say, so you were saying to Hayden, say you turn into a donkey, and I just want you to continue that thought. So if you turned into a donkey, you would.
That would be transubstantiation.
Oh, I see.
If you still looked like a human being, although you were a donkey, and you no longer had a human soul, that would be closer to what the Eucharist is.
So you'd have the appearance of one thing, but you'd still have the nature that you had.
Yeah.
Okay. Does that help you, Hayden? Don't try it. I don't want you going home and turning into a donkey.
Well, there are various ways of doing that.
But yeah, you could make a donkey of yourself, I suppose. But you see that if you turned into a donkey, you'd still be you, Hayden. Your nature is human nature, but you'd look like a donkey.
That would be like what happens in the Eucharist, except that those appearances are not appearances of any substance. They're not substantial. They're a costume.
Uh-huh.
Think of a little kid wearing a devil costume or an angel costume for Halloween. Nobody's fooled by the costume because it's not a very good costume, but that's not really an angel or a devil. It's a person who's hiding behind it. Well, Jesus is hiding behind the costume of bread and wine, but it's a good costume.
Yeah, okay. I feel like we're getting you closer there, Hayden. We've given you a lot to work with. Is that at least something to chew on intellectually for you for a while?
Yeah. I think I've got. I think I understand now.
All right, I suggest getting the book because you said you're a Protestant?
I am.
Okay, so you've got Billy Graham and you've got C.S. Lewis in there exploring a couple of different Protestantisms, and you've even got the Driver exploring his, and then you've got Tolkien explaining the Catholic side. I think you might really enjoy this book. You can get it from Ignatius Press. It's called Symbol and Substance. And I imagine if you just put in Dr. Peter Kreeft into the Google machine and Symbol and Substance, it'll take you somewhere where you can get it. Hayden, I got to go, though, because I want to get to every caller if I can. Thank you very much for the call. We go now to Robin in Nebraska, listening on the Great Spirit Catholic Radio. Robin, your question for Dr. Peter Kreeft.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm a new Catholic of 2 years, and my great-nephew seen my post on Facebook because I put my, picture and basically, walking to Franciscan sisters here in Nebraska City are my spiritual guides. But my great-nephew reached out to me and wanted to know, he just graduated from theology school, but he wanted to know why Catholics believed that the Eucharist was the actual blood and body of Christ. I tried to explain to him as what I knew, and then he came back to me, and I gave him the scripture of the Last Supper, and then he came back to me, but he says, in remembrance of me, and I said, let me get back to you because I need more research. And so when I was listening tonight, I was like, oh, my gosh, this would be so great to be able to get some more answers for him.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very good question. That's the question philosophers ask. Why? Why do we believe that it's the actual body and blood of Christ? Because Christ said so. And he said so pretty clearly in the 6th chapter of John's Gospel when out in the wilderness he said, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you have no life in you. And all of his disciples went away except the 12. Now, on all other occasions, when his disciples misinterpreted his words as literal and he meant them only as symbolic, he corrected them and brought them back. On this occasion, he didn't. He simply said, are you going to go away too? And Peter said, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. If you are a fundamentalist and want to interpret everything in Scripture literally, then why not interpret those words literally too?
Robin?
Yep. Yes, I'm right here.
Do you think that'll help you in your conversation with your grandnephew?
Well, let me give her a second answer.
Okay.
It's true that you can impose another interpretation on them. It's harder to do. It's not the natural or obvious one, especially in John 6. But Jesus does say, do this in remembrance of me. He doesn't say it's only remembrance, but it could be. Just because he says, this is my body, doesn't automatically mean that is to be taken literally. The strongest argument for me as a Catholic is that every single Christian in the world for the first 1,000 years took that literally. And all the enemies of Christianity took it literally true. So if the Catholic interpretation is not the correct one, then the Holy Spirit fell asleep for a millennium.
Okay. Yeah, I gave him a link to Trent Horn's book, Why We Were Catholic, because it talks a little bit about it in there. And he said he was going to read it, but then when I heard you tonight, I was like, oh, this would be a perfect time
I
to
think
call
this-
in and get some answers that I can give him.
I think you're. Yeah, I'm glad you did, Robin. I think this is the book for him too, because see, again, these are what Dr. Kraft has done in dialogue form here is allow these competing ideas to interact with one another. So he can in kind of listening in on that conversation. I think this would be. How old is your great nephew?
Let's see. He's probably 23 right now.
Oh yeah, you should get him this book. You should get him this book for I don't know what's coming up. What's for the 4th of July? Do we give presents on the 4th of July now? I don't know, but you can get it as it's a Symbol and Substance. You can get it from Ignatius Press pretty much wherever books are sold. I'm fairly certain of that. So. Dr. Crave, I will play the part of the. Oh no! First of all, I wanted to tell you that on I was looking on Facebook, and somebody in Boston who's a Dominican there wants you to become a Third Order Dominican. But then that brought me to this question: would you be a Dominican or a Franciscan? If you
Well, you know the difference between a Dominican and a Jesuit, don't you? The Dominicans were founded by St. Dominic in the 12th century to combat the heresy of Albigensianism, and the Jesuits were founded by St. Ignatius Loyola in the 16th century to combat the heresy of Protestantism. Now, tell me, how many Albigensians have you met lately?
so the Dominicans have your favor.
Yes.
Well, plus the Dominicans, Thomas Aquinas. I mean, he's the great
Greatest
Dominican.
mind in history.
Really, is that except for one? There was one greater philosopher than him.
The Mother of God.
Yes.
Seat of Wisdom.
And I'm looking forward to that book. Okay, so, oh, darn it. You just said something and I was going to ask you something and then it went out of my head. But, okay, so the Mother of God book, the one on the greatest philosopher in the world, will that come from Ignatius Press too, or do they have to bid on it?
I think so.
Oh, you think it will? I don't want to mess up your negotiating position.
They're
with
my
Mark
primary
Brumley.
guys.
Because the publisher of Ignatius Press is going to be on right after you. He's joining us via Skype, but that's Mark Brumley. And so this is what you are picking on the Jesuits, and my cousin.
Some of my best friends are Jesuits.
My father's cousin was a Jesuit. He's passed on now. His name was Francis Sweeney, and he was at Boston College. Did you
I knew
know
him.
Father
I did.
Sweeney?
I did indeed.
Yeah. That's a cousin of mine.
Charming Irishman.
That's exactly what he was, a charming Irishman. Yes, and I got to tell you a little story about a Jesuit. See what you think about this. This Jesuit, you will know his name. He was I don't know if he burned his draft card or if it was just his brother who burned his draft card.
Berrigan.
Dan Berrigan. I went to see Dan Berrigan talking in Boston one time. And this was when I was a radical hippie, and I wanted him to say radical hippie things. And he was talking on nonviolence, and it was a room full of radical hippies. And do you know what he talked about?
Catholicism.
Abortion.
Oh, good for him.
And I thought that is a bold and courageous man. And I've
consistently pro-life.
Yeah, he really
Across
was.
the board.
And I feel like sometimes people criticize him, because of the left wing stuff and all that. And maybe that's fair criticism. I really don't know his biography, but I really admired the man for taking that, because it's easy to do it in front of a Catholic audience.
Yeah.
But you get up in front of a bunch of hippies and say, okay, you want to talk about nonviolence? Let's talk about violence in the womb.
Touché.
And man, they did not want to talk about nonviolence then. They did not. So again, thank you so much. The hour has flown by for me. I'm very grateful for you having come and done it with us.
Thank you. It was a privilege for me.
Are you aware of what you mean to a lot of people? You're aware? No?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to tell you that.
I throw out the books and they.
I heard
they float.
that you write on the trolley or something. I heard a rumor about that.
I take planes more often than trolleys.
Okay. Somebody said you went to school on the trolley and that you would write on note cards there, but no.
I'll write on whatever.
But not a computer.
Well.
Oh, you're learning.
No. I am the world's stupidest computer user.
Oh, well, congratulations on that. That's quite an achievement.
I think that's a remarkable achievement.
Dr. Peter Kraft has been our guest. The book is Symbol or Substance, a dialogue on the Eucharist with C.S. Lewis, Billy Graham, and J.R.R. Tolkien. As I said, it's from Ignatius Press. and you should get it. It's a really good book. Coming up next, the editor and publisher of Ignatius Press will be here. It's open forum, so if you have any question at all about the Catholic faith, you are welcome to call with it, 888-318-7884. Mark will take anything. Don't hold anything back. Even if it's a challenge to the Catholic faith, Mark will take it. 888-318-7884. We'll be right back after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Did you know you can book any of our great speakers to speak at your parish or special event? Contact one of our seminar coordinators through the Speakers Bureau section on Catholic.com today to find out more information.
In his new audio presentation, The Very First Fathers, apologist Jimmy Akin takes you on a tour of the earliest Christian writings outside the New Testament. From the most famous figures and most notable works to those lesser known but no less important, this pivotal time in the development of the early church is revealed in fascinating detail. Jimmy shows how, even in the first century after the resurrection, it was necessary to defend and explain truths that are still under attack today, such as the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and the perpetual virginity of Mary. The Very First Fathers is a compelling look at the dawn of the Christian age and edifying listening for anyone who wants to understand and defend the full truth of Catholicism. Order your copy of The Very First Fathers today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Atheists have a new tactic when it comes to talking about the existence of God. Your arguments in favor of God don't even deserve a reply, they say. Because not only does God not exist, he doesn't even matter. In his new DVD, Why God Still Matters, apologist Carlo Broussard doesn't let them off so easy. He takes apart the premises of those who say God's irrelevant and teaches you what you need to demonstrate why God is just as important. In fact, in today's world, more important than ever. Don't let atheists shut down the argument before it begins. Get your copy of Why God Still Matters by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Wouldn't it be great to have a book to give to anyone to explain exactly why Catholics believe what we believe? The good news is that now there is. Why We're Catholic is the groundbreaking new resource by apologist Trent Horn. That one book you can hand to anyone as a starting point for helping them find their way into, or back to, the practice of the Catholic faith. In a series of short, easy-to-read chapters, Trent covers the whole range of common topics, starting with why we believe in anything at all, and answering all the common objections to the Catholic faith, both doctrinal and moral. Don't miss out on the most important, life-changing book to come along in years. Better yet, it's only $3 a copy when you order in bulk. Order your copies of Why We're Catholic today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
So, you're listening to Catholic Radio. I think it's safe to say that you probably want to become like Jesus. Theosis is a fancy word used to explain the process of becoming like Christ. It's how God takes sinners like you and me and transforms us into who we were created to be. Basically, rockin' saints. Clumsy Theosis is a podcast where I take 2,000 years of Catholic goodness, draw from the great minds and spiritual masters of the Church, boil it down, distill it, and give practical advice to 21st century Christians. Basically, we'll learn how to do this Catholic thing like a boss. Subscribe to Clumsy Theosis wherever good podcasts are found.
Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Turns out that today, as back then, this question has a lot of different answers. So many groups want to appropriate Jesus, tweaking his identity until he looks and sounds just like one of them. But then you no longer have the Lord, says apologist Trent Horn. You have an imposter. In his new groundbreaking book, Counterfeit Christ, Trent exposes 18 phony versions of Jesus that we encounter today, helping you to recognize the fakes when you see them, explain why they're phony, and make a case for the full truth and beauty of who Jesus is, the Christ, the Son of the living God. Order your copy of Counterfeit Christ today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Fun continues on Catholic Answers Live. It's open forum this hour. If you've got a question about the Catholic faith, we'd love to get you an answer. And if you got an argument about the Catholic faith, well, maybe we'll argue back a little bit. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-31-TRUTH if you prefer the spelled version. And to take your calls today, we got a real bigwig on the line with us. Mark Brumley is the executive chief top dog at Ignatius Press, the biggest Catholic publisher in this part of the galaxy. Hello, Mark Brumley.
How you doing?
I'm really good. Did I get your title correct? I wasn't sure if I...
Well, I'm president of Ignatius Press.
President, all right.
You know.
I might have added some words to it then, and left out that word.
You did.
we just had one of your authors on the hour before you, Dr. Peter Kraft.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, you I don't know if you know this, but you just published his latest book, Symbol, and I know you know it. I'm only messing with you, but the Symbol or Substance book. So if you see a spike in sales like tonight on the website, mm-hmm. I wonder if you can maybe put a little something in an envelope for me. Just send it my way.
Hey, I might put a little something in the envelope for Catholic Answers, and then they can figure out
the interview.
They can figure out how you fit into that.
Yeah, I told Dr. Kraft as he was leaving, I said, I'm going to tell Mark Brumley you said the next book you'll write, you don't need a royalty for. And he, I'm going to tell you what he did. He looked at me. He looked at me like I'm an idiot.
Well, well, I'm not going to suggest that you're an idiot, but I can certainly understand why he might look at you in an unusual way.
He didn't seem to appreciate that, by the way. I said, yeah, Mark Brumley's on. I'm going to tell him that you'll do the next book with no royalty. He didn't say anything, but the look was not good. The look I got was not good.
That is completely understandable on his part.
I
don't blame him.
Yeah, the man is a joyful presence. It's very nice to be around him. He really is, and that makes me feel good because not everybody who writes a lot of books necessarily has the spirit, perhaps, that they're trying to convey in those books. But it's nice to meet somebody who's lived it and seems like just a joyful presence when you're around him.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Kraft is a great guy. I mean, he was out. When was the last time I saw Peter Kraft? Probably for our our anniversary conference we had last year. So that he came out. He's one of the many speakers at the Ignatius Press anniversary conference, 40th anniversary, and we had a great time chatting, just talking about different ideas and philosophy and theology and all of that. He's an interesting guy in addition to the fact that he writes so well. He's got a lot of insights. He's got that philosopher's mind, but not in the heavy academic way. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but just looking at life and talking about something as simple as, people gather together in a room talking. What does that mean? Because I picked him up at his hotel, and we were chatting at one point before we left at the little bar area, and just talking about the dynamics of human interaction and the philosophical meaning of that, and what does it have to do with evangelization? What are people like when they talk what interests them, and how can you be aware of that when you engage in evangelization. Little stuff like that. I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is fast. And the studio was kind of full while he was here. There's a lot of young Catholics here at Catholic Answers, and they look up to Peter Kraft. They were very happy to have him in the building.
Yeah, and I look up to him, and
yeah,
I'm not that young anymore.
No, yo, come on. You're a spry. You're a young fella in the beautiful city of San Francisco. There's
you're fantasizing, man. You're fantasizing.
Well, I also believed you when you said that your offices are right down the street from Starfleet Academy. So I might be somewhat impressionable. There's like a million calls on the lines.
Okay. All right. Well, we can go to those calls, but I will just say one thing about the Starfleet Academy thing.
Okay.
Because oddly enough, this is going to sound like I'm making this up, but it's true. Oddly enough, I get asked that a lot. I think there's some kind of correlation between people that are into apologetics and people who are kind of like sci-fi geeks. I don't know. And I guess because you and I joke around about this kind of stuff on the air a lot, that might trigger it. But anyway, people have asked me about that, and they say, I hear that Ignatius Press is near Starfleet Academy. And I always say that's not correct. Ignatius Press is near where Starfleet Academy will one day be.
I gotcha.
But it's not there yet. So.
Right. But because we have the films, we know what's coming.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do.
And
I still want to try to find where that Klingon bird of prey set down,
Oh, in that park. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Golden Gate Park. Man.
That movie inspired me to do all the work that I have done to preserve whales in the intervening decades. I mean, all the labor that I have put into saving the whales is based on that movie.
I wonder if that movie inspired Pope Francis with Laudato Si. We should ask him. I mean, if he ever saw it, when he was in Argentina or something.
Everyone has seen Star Trek. Even the Pope has seen Star Trek. You know that.
Okay. All right.
Now can we go to calls?
Let's do that.
All right. Steve.
Support people.
Steve, thank you for waiting. You are first with Mark Brumley. Excuse me. I didn't forget your name. All right. With Mr. Mark Brumley. Your question, Steve.
Hello. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you, Steve.
So I had a question. So I went to church as a young kid. I haven't really gone in a while, but I was confirmed a Catholic. And they talked about the forbidden fruit, and I was wondering if that correlated to psychedelic.
Like psychedelic, like opium or something?
No, like people take like acid and shrooms and stuff, and they learn all these crazy things. I was wondering if that was what the Catholic Church meant by forbidden fruit. Because it's something that grows naturally from the earth, and people get some knowledge from it. So it seems like it might have correlated to me.
Interesting question. All right, Steve. Mark, what do you make of that?
Well, the forbidden fruit is from the book of Genesis. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God creates, in the symbolic language of the book of Genesis 1 through 3, God creates the world. And he puts man in the Garden of Eden, gives man the task of tending the garden, man here being man and woman, male and female, the task of tending the garden. He says you can eat of the fruit of all the trees in the garden except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you eat of that, you're going to die. So that was the forbidden fruit in that sense. It wasn't LSD, and nothing to do with that. And we shouldn't be so concerned about, well, what specific fruit was it? An apple? Was it a pomegranate? What kind of fruit was it? Because the point of the story is not about whether apples are bad for you or something like that. The point of the story is that God set down a commandment that was both a directive to how to live well by avoiding the direct experiential knowledge of good and evil. That's what the tree of the knowledge of good and evil represented, that human beings, by disobeying God, would come to experience good and evil as opposed to just the goodness of God's creation. God wanted to spare man the experience of evil, and so he said, don't eat of this fruit. If you do, you're going to die. What does that mean? Well, you're going to turn away from God. You're going to experience alienation from God, from self, from one another and from the rest of creation for full alienation. So the forbidden fruit in that sense is sin, basically. So don't sin. That's really what the message of Genesis is. It's not any particular drug or even any particular fruit per se. But how about that?
Okay, cool.
All right, cool. Steve, thank you. You're welcome to call anytime. Happy to take that call. Right now, I got to let you know, though, not you personally, Steve, I got to let everybody know that we're in that time of a little bit of a sale going on, a summer reading sale. We've got dozens of great books, CDs, and DVDs, and they're at like $5 intervals. You get a bunch, there's some that are $5, some that are $10, some that are $15. But here's the cool part. Some of them are as low as $1. And I'm hoping those are Trent Horn's books. Just go over to shop.catholic.com today and click on the $1, $5, $10, or $15 button, and you'll see all the stuff that's available at those prices right now at shop.catholic.com.
The Gospels make clear Jesus claimed to be God. But should we believe him? I think we should. And here's the reason why. The alternatives don't make sense. It's unreasonable to think Jesus was lying because he died for his claim to be God. Mark's gospel makes it clear that the Sanhedrin sentenced Jesus to death for blasphemy, and Jesus accepted it. People don't die for what they know to be a lie. Okay, you say, well, maybe he wasn't a liar, but perhaps he was delusional, a lunatic. I don't think this explanation works either. All the historical evidence suggests Jesus was a pretty wise guy. Even those who deny Jesus' divinity accept this. But if that's the case, well then, don't you think he's wise enough to know who he is? So, if Jesus is neither a liar nor a lunatic, then he must be who he says he is, namely Lord. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Why do we need to pray? We don't pray because God needs our prayers. We pray because we need God's grace. And every day, when I face the day, I realize I have no idea what I'm doing. And I need God to walk me through my day, step by step, giving me the grace, the counsel, the love, the encouragement that enables me to glorify Him in everything that I do and become the person He wants me to be. Prayer is my lifeline.
Open forum on Catholic Answers Live. Any kind of question on the Catholic faith is welcome. I like it when we start off with a kind of a question with a little bit of a unlikely sound to it. Like, could the forbidden fruit have been a psychedelic drug? I think that's good. It encourages the callers to know, look, you can call any question you got about the Catholic faith. We're happy to take them. And not only that, we've got the president of Ignatius Press here to answer your questions. Ignatius Press is, in addition to being one of the finest Catholic publishers in the known universe, is now the publisher of Symbol and Substance, the book we just talked with Peter Kraft about last hour. So you can go over to Ignatius Press and get that book while we're talking to Mark. Hi, Mark. You ready to take more questions?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. Let's go to Dan in Seattle, Washington, listening on Sacred Heart Radio. Dan, your question for Mark Brumley.
Well, good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon.
I've been thinking about calling in for a while. Today, I hear Star Trek, and then psychedelic drugs, and maybe I've called in on the right day. I don't know.
All right.
I don't know how to follow that, but it's a pretty heavy question, really.
Okay.
As regards the genocide of the Old Testament, when God told the Israelites to annihilate everybody, even kill the animals. It's there, and I don't believe it has any application to today's church, but it's the same God. And I don't understand what the Canaanites and the Amalekites, if however you pronounce them, what they did that was so bad that not even their sheep were going to be saved.
Good question. Boy, this is a difficult topic from my perspective because it's hard to condense an answer in a relatively short period of time, and there are actually different approaches that different Catholic theologians take in Pope Benedict XVI's Apostolic Exhortation. What is it? I knew I was going to forget it. The Latin. It is Dominus Verbum. Is that it? Word of the Lord. He talks about these dark passages of the Bible, and he gives a kind of general way of understanding or approaching these passages without going into specific detail about this passage. So let's have a little context. First, how do Christians read the whole Bible? The Christians read the whole Bible in light of the fullness of Revelation, the complete big picture from our perspective, and that is in the person of Jesus Christ. Writer of the Hebrews, first chapter of Hebrews, verse 1 says, in the past God spoke through the prophets in partial ways. Today he's spoken to us completely in his Son, Jesus Christ. So for Christians, how we understand God is anchored in the revelation of God in Jesus Christ. And so what does that do? Well, that means when we look at the Old Testament, we see the Old Testament doing several things. First, pointing us towards Christ, but in an imperfect, incomplete way. And because the fullness of our understanding of God comes through Jesus Christ, and because the Old Testament is pointing us to Christ, there's a connection between God as he's revealed in the Old Testament and God as he's revealed in Jesus Christ. But because that Old Testament is leading up to Jesus Christ, and because it's partial, incomplete, and the people that God is speaking to are people who are, they haven't got the full revelation of God in Jesus Christ, and they're still very, very sinful people, the way God communicates to them is partial and incomplete. I'll give an example of this with respect to the commandment about divorce. Remember, Jesus is asked, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? And what does Jesus do? He goes back to Genesis, and he says, but before he does that, he talks about Moses. He says, because they're asking a question, well, is it lawful to do this as Moses allowed in the law? And Jesus says, well, Moses allowed that because of the hardness of your hearts. In other words, because of your imperfection and sinfulness, you aren't able to completely accept and embrace and understand and make your own the revelation that God established in the very beginning in Genesis. Well, if you go back and you read the Torah, you'll find it's God is commanding this principle of divorce in the Old Testament. In other words, it's attributed to God. And yet Jesus refers to it as Moses. So what does he mean? He means how God has revealed himself through Moses in a limited, incomplete way that he did in Moses. Okay, now we can apply that to things like the annihilation of the people, the Canaanites, and groups like that in the Old Testament. We can say, well, what has God revealed? God has revealed that his people are not to be idolatrous, not to engage in the kind of sinful activities that these people in the land engaged in. That's point one. Point two, that they need to be separated, set apart from those people. They're not only not to do what they do, but they're not to actually interact with them, because if they interact with them, they will become corrupted and will fall into their sins. All right? These people, what they're doing is deserving of divine wrath and divine punishment, because it's contrary to God's purpose. All kinds of idolatry, all kinds of human sacrifice, all kinds of things of that sort. Okay. Those are the key fundamental points of God's revelation. But how do the Israelites, through Moses and ultimately through Joshua, who comes into the land, how do they understand this revelation? Well, they understand it in terms of God's commanding them to undertake a ban. Now, I would say, this is Mark Brumley's view. It's not something I concocted. A lot of other theologians and biblical writers and scholars and all of that talk about it. I think we have there this combination of God's revelation, which has to do with his people being faithful, not mixing with these peoples there who are engaging in corrupt activities, and that what these people are doing is worthy of divine judgment. That revelation gets mixed up with a kind of 12th century or 13th century, depending on when you date these activities, warrior mindset, and God doesn't purge that completely. He utilizes it, even though, from our perspective, in light of the full revelation that comes in Jesus Christ, we say, that's wrong. We would never do that. We could be faithful to God's revelation about how to live and how to stay pure and uncorrupted from other influences, and how to recognize that certain activities people do are worthy of divine judgment. We could do all of that without annihilating people. And that the pattern that Jesus has given us, which is to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, and to not go in and wipe out people, that revelation of how we understand God through Jesus Christ applies to us. We understand that, even though people living 1,000 years before the time of Christ, with the revelation of God that they had at that time, with the hardness of heart that they had at that time, interpreted things in a different way. Now that's as I say, that's my way of reading that. There are other people who are going to say, well, God did this because he commanded them to do that. He actually positively willed this judgment on all of those people because they were sinful, and this was how he preserved Israel from corruption and these sinful practices and so on. I find that difficult to reconcile with the idea that God loves those people. He created them. He wants to redeem them, and so on. So I have a difficulty with that interpretation, but there are exegetes who read it that way and believe that that's the most consistent and coherent way to interpret what we find in the Old Testament. I'm unconvinced. Anyway, I hope my explanation is helpful to you.
Dan, thanks very, very much. I'm leaving it there. I hope it is helpful to you. Got a lot of people on the line that want to talk to Mark Brumley, so I'm going to keep moving. Aaron in Iowa, listening on Iowa Catholic Radio. You have a question for Mark Brumley?
Oh, yeah. I was just calling to ask a question about the biblical basis differentiating mortal sin and venial sin.
Well, the biblical basis for differentiating those is bound up in the fact that the Bible makes clear that there are different degrees of sin. Now, say that on two levels. First, there are some sins that are, I'm going to use the word objective. They're objectively greater than others. It's objectively more wrong to murder someone than it is to lie to that person about whether or not you like his new haircut. So it's objectively worse to do the one thing than the other. And we see this throughout the Bible. For example, when, I'm thinking of St. Paul, when he addresses the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 6, I think it's 9 through 11, he has a long, long list of very serious sins, adultery and things of that sort. And he says, those who do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of heaven or kingdom of God. Well, if all sins were of equal significance, then why would he have to list those particular things? Why wouldn't he just say, anybody who ever does any sin will not inherit the kingdom of God? So it's clear that there's a differentiation. Some sins are more grievous or harmful than other sins. This is also kind of pointed to by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, when he's talking about the commandments, and not just the 10 commandments, but the whole of the commandments of the Old Testament. He says, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men to do this shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. So there's the idea that some of the commandments are least or lesser or not as important as others. But he who does them and who obeys those commandments, even the little ones, will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So I think we can see, and again, we could look at some other biblical passages to see that there are differentiations with respect to sins, and that differentiation touches on the distinction between what Catholics and some others call mortal and venial. Now, you'll see a similar kind of way of talking about sin in 1 John chapter 5, verses 16 through 18, where John talks about the brother who commits a sin that is not deadly versus someone who commits a sin that is deadly. I'm not sure that exactly corresponds to what we call mortal and venial sins, but I think it does provide a basis for understanding that there are some sins that involve a very serious consequence, one which we call deadly here, and other sins that are not so consequential. So does that help give you some biblical background on the point?
Yeah, I think so. The question arose from a discussion on worthiness to receive communion and how we can't receive communion if we have mortal sin, but if venial sin, then we would still be allowed to. And that's how the question kind of came up. And so I didn't expect to see that like in a biblical basis specifically with that reference, but then the question just arose from that. So I think that pretty much describes what I was
let me add one other point, because I said I was going to make 2 points and I only made one. So I talked about the objective sin, what you're doing. When you know what you're doing and you freely choose it, the thing that you're doing, and we talk about that, and it's wrong, it's contrary to one of the 10 Commandments, involves what we call grave matter, serious matter. That's objectively a mortal sin, okay? But we can talk about degrees of culpability. So would that also factors in? Do you know it's wrong? Do you freely choose it? So both of those things come into play, whether we're talking about the objective act, gravely sinful, or culpability. One is held responsible for a mortal sin. Anyway, I hear the music. That's all I'm going to say about that for now.
Aaron, thanks. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Mark Brumley.
Join us on air today on Catholic Answers Live.
Sharing the gospel with family and friends can be challenging. It's especially hard when they won't even hear you out because of all the mental roadblocks they've built up. This is Carlo Broussard, and in my new book, Prepare the Way, my aim is to help you tackle that essential first step to apologetics and evangelization, getting people to listen with an open mind. Even our best witness can bounce right off folks like these if we don't prepare the way first, breaking down barriers and leaving minds and souls free to encounter the truth. I'll give you evidence and arguments and step-by-step strategies based on asking the right questions to help them overcome their obstacles and make a straight path for the Lord. Order your copy of Prepare the Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Turns out that today, as back then, this question has a lot of different answers. So many groups want to appropriate Jesus, tweaking his identity until he looks and sounds just like one of them. But then you no longer have the Lord, says apologist Trent Horn. You have an imposter. In his new groundbreaking book, Counterfeit Christ, Trent exposes 18 phony versions of Jesus that we encounter today, helping you to recognize the fakes when you see them, explain why they're phony, and make a case for the full truth and beauty of who Jesus is, the Christ, the Son of the living God. Order your copy of Counterfeit Christ today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, Bouncing Back.
Going through a rough patch in your life or relationships? We'll help you figure out how to bounce back.
Now, back to Catholic Answers Live.
Yeah, well, sometimes we have little debates while we're on a break there, and we're debating whether cavemen had cable TV. But, Mark, you just said something to me before I went on the air, and I have to continue my debate with you slightly here, because you just derided me for believing in cavemen. Why did you say, oh, so you believe in cavemen? What was that about?
I actually was not deriding you.
Oh.
I was just giving you a little bit of a hard time, because
okay.
Some people read Genesis in such a way that it's very difficult to see how cavemen fit in.
Oh, I see.
So.
Oh, I get it. But you know what? I have to say I've been very influenced by Chesterton on this point, because he has a beautiful thing about cavemen in, I forget which book, but where he talks about the caveman as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that bit, but
yeah, I think that's in I would say Everlasting Man.
Yeah,
I could be wrong about that.
That's it. No, you're right, Everlasting Man, and he talks about how we think of the caveman as this poor, benighted, grunting, troglodyte, but in fact, what the caveman was a magnificent artist and a true artist. Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, so it's like if you saw those cave drawings and they were presented today, as the work of some great artist, you'd say, well, that's not very good. But as the first paintings, you say, hey, that's a masterpiece.
Yeah. I actually think they're pretty good, though. I couldn't do them. So, well, I'm gonna go to calls now. Enough talking about cavemen.
I think it would be wise we go to calls.
Right. Alec in Ohio, listening on 9:10 a.m. Have you got a question for Mark Brumley?
Yes. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for taking my call.
Happy to.
So my question is regarding literature. I have some friends who they are very strong Lord of the Rings fans or Star Wars fans, and they think that Harry Potter is very sinful, and I want to know your opinion on that.
On which one? On Harry Potter?
On what makes a piece of literature bad for a good Catholic to read?
Well, that's a really complicated question. And my good friend Joseph Pierce has written a lot about this. Michael O'Brien, likewise. I don't know that I fully agree with them. Probably lean to the extent that Joseph and Michael kind of diverge a little bit. I probably lean closer to Joseph. But anyway, what I would say about this is, again, we were talking earlier about mortal and venial sin. We're talking about objective nature of things and subjective nature of things. And I would say, if there's anything that you read that that you read carefully and thoughtfully, and it nevertheless leads you to think bad thoughts or inclines you to do bad things, then you shouldn't read that. And I would say the same thing about watching television shows and seeing movies. And people will differ in both their dispositions and their weaknesses and so on. So this comes up. I get Harry Potter questions a lot. I read, I think, all the Harry Potter books, saw all the Harry Potter movies. For me, no big deal. I didn't see them. They didn't cause me to want to go out and become a wizard. I didn't suddenly believe in the occult, and so on and so forth. And I think probably the vast majority of people that read these books don't have that experience. I don't think they become demon possessed. I don't think they become satanic worshipers and all that. Does that mean I think Harry Potter and similar kinds of literature is perfectly fine for anybody and everybody? No, I'm going to say there are some young people that probably shouldn't read Harry Potter. And it's not to say that Harry Potter is intrinsically evil, but it's not something that they should read. I'd say there's probably a lot of fiction that some young people can read that others can't. There's probably a lot of fiction that no young people should read, even though adults could read it and not find it problematic. I'd say the same thing, by the way, about certain passages of the Bible in the Old Testament. Certain things, I don't think young people should read the Bible because they aren't necessarily sufficiently mature. They don't necessarily have an adequate grasp of the biblical narrative and how to read it and interpret it. So I'd say that's true of the Bible. It's certainly true of other non-divinely inspired works of literature like Harry Potter or even Lord of the Rings. An interesting thing about Lord of the Rings, when I was in high school, I was an evangelical Christian, zealous for Jesus and all of that, sold out for the Lord, as we said. And I remember reading. I remember people reading The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and friends of mine trying to get me to read those books. And as a devout evangelical fundamentalist Christian, I wouldn't do it. Why? Because there was a wizard in it. Gandalf is a wizard. He uses magic. There are all kinds of magical elements in those books. And more to the point for me, most of the people I knew who read those books were the people that were into drugs. So I thought, hey, they're into drugs, you got wizards, you got this occult stuff, don't read those books. Well, after a while I found out, and I was a big C.S. Lewis fan, he really inspired me, helped shape my early evangelical Christianity before I became a Catholic. And I found out that Tolkien was a friend of his, and so I read The Hobbit, and I read Lord of the Rings, and I realized that that I thought, there were people that could misread these things, but someone who's a sensible person coming at it with a, kind of reasonable, ethical worldview would not think that Lord of the Rings is promoting witchcraft, and that the fact that there's a wizard involved with it and magical elements does not make it evil. So that's how Lord of the Rings changed my thinking. Now I love Lord of the Rings, as my kids will tell you. So I'd say general principle is, if anything causes you to stumble or to fall into sin, you need to avoid it. Doesn't mean you need to avoid it forever. You might grow mature in your ethical and spiritual life and come to a point where you can read something that's not objectively gravely sinful in and of itself, but otherwise would cause you to fall into temptation. But we have to be prudent. There's plenty of things that I can't read. I used to tell this to my kids. There are TV shows I can't watch, and there are books that I can't read because they're not good for me spiritually, so I avoid them. On the one hand. On the other hand, we have to recognize that the depiction of evil or many of these things in literature that some Christians say, well, it's not edifying, that isn't necessarily true. The Bible depicts lots of evil things, and yet it's eminently edifying. So it requires prudence and good judgment. I think also learning how to read literature helps a lot, that you don't become so enamored of reading a work of fiction that you buy into a flawed worldview. I read a lot of science fiction, lots of dubious worldview presentations in some of the science fiction literature I read, but I'm able to distinguish what's right and wrong in those things because I think I've acquired a certain level of maturity as a reader, and I can be edified even reading something that I know has a flaw in it, even a deep flaw, as a more mature reader. So I hope that's helpful.
Alec, does that help you?
Yes. Yes, it did. This will end a very long argument. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. That's what we're here for. Ending arguments.
Gee.
I hope that you're on the winning side. He sounds a little bit gleeful, and like it will end the argument in my favor. Did you catch that subtext? Or
I did kind of get a little bit of that going on.
Yeah, good. All right, Alec.
I hope he wins the argument in favor of the truth, whatever that is. So.
But there's another thing too that's a weird phenomenon of our age. There are books being written for children and young adults and teens that are actually evil, and they're unmixed evil. And I'm thinking of Philip Pullman's books. But they have an evil intention, which is to lead children away from God or to lead children away from a moral life. And you got to, as a parent, just say no. Well, maybe not.
That's right.
I mean, maybe it's not just no. Maybe it comes with a lot of explanation and love and whatnot in order not to turn it into the forbidden fruit.
Right. But to go back to the first caller.
Yeah, right. But there is not a way in this world I would have let any of my children read anything by Philip Pullman as a child.
Right.
I
agree.
It'll eat your soul. Maybe I'm being a little dramatic. Sometimes I can be a little dramatic, but
some things are harmful.
Yeah.
Especially to children with very vivid imaginations.
Right. And
they shouldn't be exposed to them. As simple as that.
They should not. Right.
And other children. I would agree with you with respect to Pullman. I can't envision a situation where I would say, a child should read Philip Pullman. But there are children who are more mature and can read things that other children can't. And so it requires the exercise of parental prudence and to know your children.
Thank you very much, Mark. For you're a moderating to my drama queenness sometimes. Shop.catholic.com has everything's on sale over there, 10, 15, 5, or as low as $1. Go over to shop.catholic.com and get your stuff really cheap.
There's only one. Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live is proudly supported by CatholicChemistry.com, a new dating site for Catholics who want to do dating right and believe relationships start with Catholic chemistry. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicChemistry.com for their generous support on the web at CatholicChemistry.com.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
I'm Jeanette DeMello, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register and co-host of Register Radio with Matthew Bunson. Join us every week as we talk with the Register's expert writers and editors about the news you need to know and offer authentic Catholic insights on the important stories that impact your life. Register Radio, every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern and Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern, here on EWTN Global Catholic Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Mark Brumley is our guest. Mark is the author of The 7 Deadly Sins of Apologetics, and he is the president of Ignatius Press. And if you quote him a Bible verse, I just found this out. He just knows what that verse is. It's amazing.
You're not right. You tell him the truth. Now, the truth was what? What did I actually say?
We just quoted you a Bible verse. You knew what was at that verse, and you said it was just lucky. You just landed on one that I knew.
Yes, that's more or less it.
I don't believe it.
Because obviously some people have lots of verses of the Bible memorized. So when they have lots of verses of the Bible memorized, you quote it, you cite a chapter and verse, and there's a good chance, okay, they're going to get it. But it looks so impressive. I know Catholics get in awe of this. Like you quoted to me a particular verse, and I said what it was right away. But I just happen to know that verse because it's a famous verse. It's a kind of controversial verse. So I happen to know it. It'd be like John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Of course, I know that particular verse. But don't ask me what John – well, I know what John 1:14 is, Word became flesh. But don't ask me what John 16 is because, I kind of vague idea what's
that's the part where he says the part after –
that's right. The stuff that comes next.
Right. The two verses that I am always solid on, I never miss on them. Genesis 1:1 and John 1:1. I can 100% hit them every time. Paul in Denver, Colorado, who's listening on his Amazon Echo, which makes me so happy. Your question for Mark Brumley, Paul.
Hey there. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Happy to.
I actually have two, but I will stick with just one question and let you get to the other callers. I'm a Catholic, and I'm trying to get back into the church. And, of course, I have so many barriers I'm trying to crumble, and they keep coming up. And you were just talking about John. My question about this one verse in there that kind of difficult to swallow, it is John chapter 14, verse 6, that he said, no one come to the Father except through me. How am I to take that in when I'm thinking about my Buddhist, Hindus, Jewish, Muslim friends?
Okay, well, we'll say this. Everybody, for anyone, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Jews, whatever, atheists, agnostics, for anyone to come to be in right relationship with God, it is the work of grace. It's a gift of God. God gifts us with that relationship through the Holy Spirit working in us. So how does it that God has brought about the giving of the gift of grace to the human race? How has mankind come to receive that? Well, that's through Jesus' gift of himself in obedient love to the Father. Jesus gave himself. He allowed all the bad things that were happening to him to happen to him, and he willingly took those on because the Father wanted him to do that, and he wanted to be obedient to the Father, and he made all of that, all that he suffered, all that he was, a gift to the Father. And because of that, because of God and his wisdom, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit decided that grace would be given to the human race as a result of that, because human race lost grace and right relationship with God because of sin, which is disobedience, so that the triune God decided that grace would be restored through obedience, the obedience of the Son of Jesus, who's true God and true man. Because of that, anyone who receives grace receives it because of what Jesus Christ did on the cross. So when Jesus says, and the whole verse says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me or except through me. He's saying that any reconciliation between God and man that occurs comes about as a result of grace through me. And so when we talk about, say, a Buddhist, we're assuming somebody who doesn't really know Jesus, hasn't heard of Jesus, or for whatever reason honestly doesn't believe Jesus is who he says he is, but who nevertheless responds to the grace that he has. And he dies, and we believe it's possible for that person to be saved. But how is he saved? Is he saved through Buddhism? No. How is he saved? He's saved through Jesus Christ, even though he doesn't know it, even though he doesn't realize it. When he was given whatever graces he was given, and he cooperated with those graces, when that happened, it was the grace of Jesus Christ operative in him. He didn't know it at the time, but we say, nevertheless, Jesus' grace was operative in him. Now, that's a kind of extraordinary way of salvation occurs. Normally, we want people to be saved, to come to know the Father by coming to know Jesus Christ in a very explicit way. That's why we evangelize. But it is possible for non-Christians to come to the Father through Jesus in this exceptional way when they, through no fault of their own, don't believe the gospel. Does that make sense?
It certainly does. Thank you very much for answering my question.
Thank you, Paul. Maybe that second question, Jimmy Akin's going to be here both hours tomorrow. You maybe give a call because we're going to do a little extra open forum. It'll only be open forum first hour, though. So give a call tomorrow with that other question, Paul, because I got to keep moving. There's a lot of people on the line, and I haven't gotten to them. Kevin in New Jersey, watching on YouTube Live. Okay. You are next, Kevin. Your question for Mark Brumley.
Hello?
Hello, Kevin.
I used to be Catholic, and I found out that's not right to worship statues other than the Virgin Mary. It never says in the Bible to do that stuff. And
well, that's good, because that's good, Kevin, that you don't worship statues of Virgin Mary. Guess what? The Catholic Church doesn't want you to do that.
But when I went to church, I saw people, and even the priest, and everybody was bowing down to statues and praying to it. It's not right. It's called idolatry. It's a huge sin.
Well, Kevin, let me push back with that a little bit, because statues and icons and paintings of Jesus or of saints are representations of them, but we're not supposed to worship them. We're not supposed to treat those things as if we think Jesus is really residing there in that statue, or Mary is really residing there in that statue. That would be idolatry, but that's not what the church uses those statues. Now, of course, just like last night when I was talking to my wife, because she's back in San Francisco Bay Area and I'm here in St. Louis dealing with family issues here with my sick mother in the hospital. I really please pray for her. I was doing a little video call with my wife, and I blew her a kiss, and she blew me a kiss. Well, I wasn't kissing my iPhone because I somehow thought I should love my iPhone. I was responding to that image of her, which I wasn't kissing in and of itself, but using that as a way of expressing my love for her, the person, not the image. And similarly, when we talk about Jesus and using images, a crucifix or a statue of Jesus or whatever, even when we make an act of devotion towards that, it's not the crucifix or the statue of Jesus that we honor. It's actually the person represented by that. And that's the difference between idolatry in the strict sense and what Catholics do. Yeah, we venerate statues and images and all that, but not in and of themselves, but the people who are associated with them. So that's what that is. You know, in the Old Testament, God actually commanded the use of images for religious purpose. You remember the Ark of the Covenant, that big old box? You know, Indiana Jones was after. Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, what was on top of that? 2 angels. 2 angels, gold angels. And then if you were to go in the ancient temple that God commanded the people of Israel to build, you would have found huge statues of angels and carvings on the wall of things in heaven and earth. Is that idolatry, even though it was the use of imagery for religious purpose? No, because the Israelites were not worshiping those things as if they were gods. And similarly, Catholics don't worship, or they shouldn't worship, statues as if they're gods, even though they use statues to call to mind saints whom they honor. We honor the saints as holy men and women, but we shouldn't be treating them as God. And that includes the Blessed Virgin Mary. We honor her because Jesus honored her and God honored her. Elizabeth said that she is blessed among all women, you know, and Mary said of herself, inspired by the Holy Spirit, all ages will call me blessed. So we honor her, but we don't worship her.
But it says, you shall not make any carved images of stuff from heaven,
right?
Or beneath
like
on earth.
angels on top of the Ark of the Covenant, or like big statues of angels in the temple. You know, you're quoting Exodus, don't make statues, and yet what did God command? He commanded the making of statues. Put them on top of the Ark of the Covenant, put them in the temple. So is God contradicting himself? No, because that passage in the commandments in Exodus 5 is talking about making statues for the purposes of treating them as if they're gods, not for just any old religious use. That's okay, because God, and it's not only is it okay, God commanded that it be done. He didn't say, hey, it might be a good idea for you to do this, put these angels on top of the ark. Might be a good idea for you to put big, 18-foot statues of angels in the temple. No, he commanded that it be done. So we can't pit God in Exodus chapter 5, Exodus chapter 20, verse 5, and God in 1 Kings against each other. We say, no. Let's understand what he's talking about when he forbids the making of statues for worship. He's saying we shouldn't treat these statues as if they're gods. That's what he's talking about. But he doesn't say we should never make statues, or we should never venerate people, or we should never bow down to people. The Old Testament is filled with examples of where one man bows down to another man as an expression of honor, not as an expression of divine worship. I think that's probably all we got time for on that, Kevin. I hope that's helpful.
Kevin, I'm going to leave it there, and you call again too, Kevin. We'd love to hear from you. But there's a couple other people, and I want to see how many I can get in here before we have to go. Martha in San Antonio, Texas, listening on Guadalupe Radio. Can you ask your question kind of quickly?
Yes, sir. What I'm wondering about is what happens to somebody's soul. Say, for instance, somebody who molested his daughters and other people outside of his family, and then later on remarried, entered into another family, and then he killed his wife, killed the mother-in-law, and then he killed himself. So I've always wondered what happens to his soul if he asks for forgiveness at the time that he killed himself.
Okay, Martha, you just got a minute, Mark.
Yeah, so it's possible that someone like that could be forgiven if he's truly repentant for his sins and loves God for God's own sake and is sorry for it. It's possible he can be forgiven. That doesn't mean he'll get off scot-free. He may have to undergo serious purification in purgatory, but it's possible to be forgiven. Sure. I don't want to make light of that, because those are very, very serious and heinous things, and they need to be dealt with. But God loves everybody. He's merciful, and he wants everybody to come to repentance. So it is possible that someone like that could be saved.
And when you say possible, that doesn't sound like a guarantee.
No, there's no guarantee. I mean, God is the judge, and it depends whether the man dies in a state of grace as a result of charity, love of God, repentance for his sins.
Martha, I hope that was helpful to you. I'm sorry I didn't leave more time for that question. If you got a follow-up, give us a call sometime, and we'll try to help you out with that. Mark Brumley is the author of The 7 Deadly Sins of Evangelization. He is the president of Ignatius Press, and he kisses his wife through the phone at night when she's not
I do. But I don't worship her, and I don't worship the phone either.
Mark, thanks very much for a great hour.
Thank you. God bless.
All right, we got Jimmy for 2 hours tomorrow. We're going to do some weird questions with Jimmy, and the first hour will be all open forum. You are welcome to call then. We'll be here on Catholic Answers Live waiting for you, God willing, at that time.